Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 122. And this episode, we wanted to talk about zombies, because zombies have been a figure throughout pop culture for a very long time, and video games are absolutely no exception, going way back.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as far back as Zombies Ate My Neighbors on the NES to all the way modern stuff like, as of when we're recording, the recent release of Dying Light 2, Stay Human, although they are called Infected, and we'll get into that too. But zombies are kind of pervasive as fodder in games, much like Nazis. Nobody feels bad about killing them. Come for me if you feel differently. And it's one of those things that, like, zombies are used effectively in many different ways. I mean, we had the Walking Dead Telltale games where the zombies were there, but it was more about the people, much like the graphic novel and the TV show it's based on. And it's very interesting when zombies are used as a set piece beyond just being something to kill. A great example of that also is in the Last of Us series, the clickers, which are mushroom-related zombies, but still effectively zombies, are an interesting twist. And what I love about zombies in this medium, much like TV and movies also, is there are so many different ways to do it, so many different ways to refer to them, to have their origins be, to show up. And it is just kind of feels like a staple in the game space now, in the same way that, like, Mario is a staple in the game space.
Oh, absolutely. And no matter what you would call this form of undead, because all up and down, you can copyright however you want it, I guess. But the idea of an undead or a soulless body that has been reanimated through possession, whether supernatural or fungal or natural, a curse upon everything, whatever it is, you can make it apply to wherever you're setting or whatever you want it to be, or how much of a threat that you want it to be. I mean, we talked about Castlevania not too long ago, and one of the first enemies you run into, I think the first enemies you run into, are zombies. Just sort of mindless, lifeless, moving slowly creatures. And that is something that makes them very effective when you want to have them as cannon fodder, as you want to have them as that nameless, faceless, infinitely generating whatever it is. Well, lots of people have died over the years. In the history of people, there's a lot of people in the ground. And if you want to use magic or whatever you want to bring them out, well, there they are, and they can come at you as quickly or as slowly as you'd like. And yeah, they make for a very effective early enemy or outnumbering kind of force, because no matter what, it definitely plays into a certain primal feeling of that kind of thing even existing, let alone coming at you in numbers.
Yeah, for sure. And like we both mentioned, I mean, zombies have been in video games since the Nintendo, probably even on the Atari if I looked. I just don't know off the top of my head. But I would feel like in the zeitgeist of gaming, the game that put zombies on the map is the original Resident Evil, because we had reached a point where graphics could truly be terrifying. And of course, there's survival horror moments and games before Resident Evil. I'm not saying that that's where that started. We talk about how the original Metroid has feeling of survival horror and unnervingness, but like, with the revolutionary graphics at the time, like I think of that very first scene or early scene in Resident Evil that everyone remembers of that zombie slowly turning around. That was horrifying on a level we just had not experienced as video game players. Much like I think about how in the later Resident Evil games and even in like Dead Rising, which was a later franchise, the revolutionary addition of running zombies, like zombies were always lumbering slow enemies, and then they started adding swarms of zombies and running zombies. And like there are different ways that those kinds of characters prey on your fear. But what I think makes Resident Evil stand out so much above everything else is that it's not just the zombies that are scary. It's the location, it's the situation, it's the atmosphere. And they've done throughout the course of the series zombies in different ways. Some of the most interesting ones being, for me, Resident Evil 4, which is also my favorite game in the series, with like the parasitic zombies that like bust out of the enemy's heads and stuff. And it's really interesting how we engage with undead. I mean, also I referenced Mario earlier. Technically, Dry Bones is undead. Technically, he's a skeleton, but like he is canonically undead within the Mario canon.
But ambulatory skeletons really should be classed, if not exactly as zombies, but under that umbrella of undead, and that wasn't just a Resident Evil pun to do umbrella. But you're right. In that way, there is that undead, zombie, whatever, reanimated form coming at you in something as family-friendly as Mario.
Yeah, I mean, also, like, they're not zombies either, but in the broader scope of undead, we have ghost Pokemon, which are, like, there's so many theories online that Gengar is just an undead Clefairy and things like that. Like, Pokemon deals with death and horror more than we like to admit. See the Pokedex entry for Drifloon, which will always be horrifying, and then they even toy with that in Arceus. I won't spoil it.
Yeah.
So, like, I think what's really interesting about zombies in games is how the different mediums use them. I recently beat the first Dying Light, and, like, what I loved about that representation of infected is they move and lumber or run like your typical horror zombies, but that game is focused more, it's first person, but it's about parkour, but it's about jumping from rooftop to rooftop and, like, sliding down zip lines and, like, drop kicking and running. And it was a way more interesting way to engage with zombies for me, because while you can fight a bunch of them and you get rewards and XP for fighting them, you can also just as easily hop over their heads or, like, push through them or, like, dash past them, slide under them. And, like, I love that kind of dynamic for something with infected, because games are mostly about shooting them up or avoiding them at all costs. This kind of let you play with it in a few different ways, which I thought was really fascinating. You know, the zombies themselves or infected, as they're called in that game, were pretty run-of-the-mill. You know, some ran, some screamed, some were mutated. There were exploders. There were ones that spit bile, like, you know, a whole smorgasbord of
all
undead.
the disgusting stuff.
But I also think about something that put zombies on the map later on, too, in a multiplayer and kind of fun fodder kind of way, is Left 4 Dead. Yeah. Left 4 Dead is one of those games that it's one of the few games that has almost no story, that I just loved playing with friends. Because the characters you play as were so well developed and had great voice lines, but also it was just really interesting the way the AI worked and the different specialty zombies and the horrifying situations they put you in pretty easily if you got too confident.
Yeah, there's a whole litany of dangers you could put yourself in pretty quickly, pretty easily. I think one of the other reasons why the undead, zombies, all of this is very widely applicable and adaptable is the fact that it doesn't have to have an agenda, so you can give them whatever you want. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Matt, that killing Nazis in a video game is always great, always acceptable, victimless, really. But there is, again, an ideology behind it.
Yeah.
But zombies, maybe a bioengineering corporation is just going too far and playing God and making these horrible things. Maybe there's some kind of evil necromancer that's making these things happen. Maybe something went crazy, or maybe it's just what happens to people when they die now and we can't explain it, out of The Walking Dead or what have you. And so it's a little less of a, you know, we need to get to the bottom of this. It's, we just need to survive. Sometimes it's kill them, but does killing them solve anything? Maybe. It solves the problem of how will I see tomorrow, but running away could also do that. And I am somebody that enjoys, I don't hate zombies out of course, but I am often wary of franchises or new things that are like, it's a zombie game. Like, what are you doing with that? Because there again, it's very adaptable. And I played some Left 4 Dead, but I'm not a huge multiplayer first-person shooter guy. And so I saw a lot of the fun people were having. It's like, it's not for me. It's not because I don't like the horror. It's not because I don't whatever. But this type of game isn't getting me. And so a lot of times where it's like, we're just selling it because it's a zombie game. Don't you want that kind of horror game? That's not one kind of horror game. We got to be more specific.
Sure. And I will say, like, you brought up the morality. Zombie games can have some really interesting morality.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are so many zombie games that I've played where you have a sidekick or a friend or someone you're bonding with, and then, of course, they get bitten and they hit it, and they don't tell you, and then next thing you know, you have to be the one to end them. And, like, that's a moral quandary that, like, I mean, in real life, I've already told my spouse, if there's a zombie outbreak, put a shotgun in my mouth and make me end. I don't want to live that way. I don't want you to have to live that way. I just, nope, don't want to try and survive in the zombie apocalypse. Let's just say goodbye.
I'm technically an Eagle Scout, so give me a week and then I'll make a decision. But
Right, exactly. You'll chain me up with like a dog collar in your backyard. Like, Matt, I can save you. Don't worry.
don't worry about this. Like, I'm not overly optimistic, but let's roll that dice for a little while, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think just blankly going, I made a zombie game doesn't hold as much water now. Although one of my
except I made a game with zombies in it.
I was just about to bring that up.
Excellent.
So like Xbox 360 had a game, I think it might have been on the PlayStation Store as well, called I Made a Game with Zombies in It. And it was your basic
dual stick shooter.
Yeah. And it just played the same song over and over again, and you just fought waves of zombies until you died. And it was so much fun. It was multiplayer, and it was a basic concept. You are a person trying not to die. Here are zombies, don't die.
Yes. The title of the game is written in all caps and misspelled in the style of the time. I believe it was I space MAED. There might have been some leet, some numbers replacing letters in there. And the song is called I Made a Game with Zombies in It. And during the chorus, which consists entirely of that phrase, the lighting and background and everything changes to almost be like a dance club. Also, the song was about how it's only $1. Come play this game. It leaned into the aspect of zombies is mindless, and this fun is mindless. I think these are two great tastes that can be mindless together. And they were right. It was
fun
a lot
fact,
of fun.
If you really enjoyed that game and are looking for something similar, there is a game called Vampire Survivors, which is on Steam right now, gathering steam, as it were. That is very Castlevania influenced. That is the style of I Made a Game with Zombies in It, but with a variety of enemies and power-ups and different abilities. And it's quite incredible.
Was that the one that was made as part of a game jam?
I believe so. It had been on Steam for a few years, and then people just kind of discovered it this year as a fluke, and it's just starting to take off.
I'm thinking of a different game then. There was a big Vampire the Masquerade game jam recently that...
this is something different, I think. But yeah, I think that why I always come back to those kinds of games too is because the games that do it interestingly are the ones I want to engage with. I mean, also, there aren't just zombies here on Earth, but there can be zombies in space. I recently, as of a few years ago, played through the Dead Space duology. We pretend the third one doesn't exist. And the necromorphs are essentially space zombies, and they're horrifying. And those games are terrifying in the best way. And in that game, at least in the original version, in the first game, the lead character, Isaac, is silent. And so it's really quiet in those games. In the remake that they're working on now, his voice actor from the second and third games is reprising his role. And they're going to add some dialogue. But the idea is they want to still keep the atmosphere the same. And I think what I love about most games that are non-comedic with zombies is that they're very atmospheric, and I love a world that's atmospheric and can suck you in, and that's often associated with the undead and those kind of undead games.
It's an exploration of loss of agency and loss of control, because if some parasite, some curse, some whatever it is, whatever mystic MacGuffin, I guess, but not a MacGuffin, is causing these bodies to be reanimated, is causing these sorts of things to happen. And it often happens to other humans or other folks that you are like. It is this deep primal fear of that could also be you. Sometimes a matter of, if you die in a zombie game, sometimes you are just horribly killed. And Resident Evil does a great job of showing that in all its PS1 polygon glory. But there's also times where, well, if they get you, you become one of them, and you become that fear for somebody else. And that is a very tangible, palpable worry and fear. And if done even competently, is very effectively wielded in all of these games.
Yeah, for sure. That said, that zombies can be very funny, and the comedic approach to zombies, like in movies and TV, is also found in gaming as well. I mean, my earliest example of it was in, I think it's Metal Slug 3. It might be Metal Slug 2. One of them has a debuff where if you get bit by a zombie in the undead stage, you then become a zombie. And you can still fight, but now you can't shoot. You can barely shoot your gun. You lumber along, and you can projectile vomit across the stage. And it's wild and just ridiculous and hilarious.
Yes. And then you have games that really explore the notion of some of what makes zombies so scary are times where things that would normally stop a living, breathing, flesh and blood human may not stop a zombie, whether through pain or anything else. You blow off somebody's leg, whether it is a mortal wound or not, the sheer pain and suffering and shock that happens will take someone down. If you shoot a zombie in the leg, they might just hop or crawl towards you, and that's terrifying and horrible. But if you are playing as a zombie character who can detach their limbs and control them, or you just keep going, it comes back around again as kind of hilarious. I don't know if I would call this an obscure game, but one that hasn't had a ton of releases was Stubbs the Zombie, Rebel Without a Pulse, which was originally on the Xbox and I'm pretty sure has had a Steam release. So it has. Yeah, it can be played these days and is a wonderful, not only wonderful send-up of a certain period of time of like radio and film. It's very 1950s, post-war suburbia, while also you are now a zombie. And what comes of that and what goes on with that. Or the Medieval series, if one could call it a series. It's had a few releases, but what's his name? Sir Dan? The reanimated skeleton. It's been a while since I've played that one, and I didn't get as deep into it as others. But it was a lot of fun, and that's one, too, where it's kind of very Jack Skellington, because I am dead, I can take off my head and recite Shakespearean quotation. You can just do ridiculous things with that, and that's a fun mechanic to just explore while also kind of having a laugh in some very dire circumstances.
Yeah, I think that zombies are best explored in both those ways, and I don't think there's one right way to use them. I think while talking about the morality of enemies and villains, I do think with zombies there's less concern for that. There can be, of course, depending on how you build your stories, but I think that also it's interesting when zombies have different ways of engaging or infecting others, where it's not just eating your brains. It could be, like the spore transmission in The Last of Us. What I love about the way The Last of Us handles zombies in both the first and second game is that, and this can be cliche in media, but it does do a lot of the humans are really the bad guys. The zombies suck, but the humans are the real bad guys. But that's kind of a narrative that we see a lot. And I don't think that The Last of Us does it poorly. I think they actually do it quite well. But, I also love that in those games, you don't have to fight them. In the stealth sections, you can avoid most, if not all of them. And as someone who enjoys playing games without combat, like, it's interesting to see the games that take that approach. You could probably play most of Dying Light without fighting zombies. It'd be really hard because there are some boss zombies and stuff, but you could do pacifist runs. Same with The Last of Us. Like, you could, I think there are achievements for avoiding every clicker, except for the bosses that you're forced to engage with. But I think those kinds of engagements mechanically are also really interesting. How many different ways can you interact with zombies in games and the undead in games that's not just shoot them in the face?
Right, because it's very easy to make it into a shooting gallery. There are both aliens and zombies in something like Area 51, a light gun game. It's literally a shooting gallery. Or something like I made a game with zombies in it, or any of the zombie what have yous of the Call of Duty series that I can only barely speak to. But to go back to Resident Evil for a moment, even back then you were kind of being given a choice because it's survival horror. Yes, there are violent solutions to these things, but they don't give you enough resources to really lean into it. And in fact, a lot of the best speedruns I've seen, good runs that I see people do, a great way to play is to not engage, is to avoid, is to find ways to sneak past and snake past, because yeah, there's some great satisfaction of I'm safe now, I've taken down all of these zombies. Some of them come back. There's so many other ways around it, and while mechanics in game systems and the fractal nature of it all has only gotten more intricate and mature as time has gone on, even back in, 1996, there were shades to how you would interact with this horrifying concept and the figures they represent.
Yeah, I mean, and also there was a long time where like zombies in games were considered hit makers, right?
Mm.
Tons of like Silent Hill and Resident Evil and all these other franchises.
There was a rhythm game about fighting zombies that used the Guitar Hero controller. It had Neil Patrick Harris and Felicia Day in
I
it.
remember this. I don't remember what it's called, but I
Rock
do.
of the Dead, I'm pretty sure it's called.
That sounds like it would be correct. But like zombies have, I think, on some level become a bit cliche. And like also like most recently, because Sony kind of focuses on like big AAA story driven, large open world games, they made Days Gone, which, the creator of the game is attacking journalists for not liking his game, which is a bad look. But the game itself didn't sell well or do well. It's on PS Plus now, and I've been wanting to try it just because Sam Witwer plays the lead character. But that's one of those things where like this is a game with zombies in it. There are hordes of zombies. It touted its technology for how it generates the hordes, and most people just weren't interested because the story was kind of boring. I mean, yes, the lead character is a generic white dude based on a generic white dude actor who I love, who I think is a good actor, but like maybe if they diversified the cast or try, like there are a ton of different ways they could have made something like that interesting. But I think it just goes to show that having the undead or doing something like what Resident Evil and like even Dead Rising in the past have done isn't a guarantee for a success now. I think people want more complex storytelling with their zombies, which is why games like both of the Last of Us games have done so well, among many other things.
Yeah, and you can have that sort of, I don't even want to call it old school or old style because it was like 10 years ago, really. It wasn't that long ago. Long enough. There is a place for that, but more in indie games or more in smaller spaces, smaller scope games. You can't necessarily, having a game that is a zombie game is not a guaranteed hit maker for a AAA studio.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's part of why I wanted to talk about this as a topic, because I think it's very easy to find shorthand in gaming. Military shooters is a shorthand, zombie game is a shorthand. And like, I am really interested in the future of what games with zombies look like. It makes me think of stuff that I've seen in film. Like there was a movie called Warm Bodies, which was based on a book. And it's about people living during a zombie outbreak and how they think there's no way to save the zombies. And it's this young woman meeting a young boy who's a zombie who can kind of think for himself. And the narration is from his perspective. And their love for each other slowly brings him back from being a zombie. And it's cute. It's wacky. It's a little silly. But it was an interesting story. Like, because it didn't just choose zombies are always bad, there's no way to save them, kill them. Like, it was an interesting approach to that kind of storytelling. And so I'm always curious and interested about how zombies are used in storytelling in that way and if there are interesting ways to do it.
Yeah, I mean, even on a comedic exploration of that, I'm thinking of the film Shaun of the Dead.
Sure.
Because zombies can be used as a signifier, as a shorthand for a lot of aspects, a lot of things. It could be for fear of death. It could be for loss of control and agency, as mentioned before. And it can also just be about the drudgery and mundanity of life in the way that it's sort of explored in Shaun of the Dead before it becomes a big old zombie movie. And that, too, is something where I feel like that is a topic that, if not specifically explored in some games, we work around and work with, and our preconceived notions of who we are and what we are. And I can only imagine that in the vast ocean of games that I do not know, that has happened, that there is at least a few zombie games that, whether they're visual novels or arcade shooters or RPGs or puzzle games or whatever, that explore the idea of zombies as zoning out of your life.
Yeah. And I think also the different ways you can portray zombies have come into an interesting place within the last few years. Also, like one of our favorite zombies, I know for the two of us, Roddy Tops from the Shantae series is an quote unquote attractive zombie. Take that as you will. It's just like there are ways to expand these kinds of characters and do something different. We both backed a game called Romancylvania, which will have a romantic interest, I believe, that is also a zombie. And so like,
I think so, yeah.
And a lot of that is meant to be comical and lighthearted. The idea of sleeping with a zombie sounds mostly disgusting. But like, it's playing with the form. I mean, also, I think something that makes zombies worth talking about is they've become ubiquitous as just danger. I think about Minecraft, and like at night, you don't go out because those zombies, like if they get their hands on you, you're in trouble, especially the tiny fucking zombies that you can't even hit that run really fast. Hate those guys. But like, I mean, you could even argue that like the Emmys in Metroid were like robotic zombies almost, like just pursuing you endlessly without thought or any mind of their own. And I'm interested more and more in how we expand the perception and creation of these kinds of characters. Because we've hit a point where if you're just making a game where you kill zombies, I'm less interested. Like Back 4 Blood, which I did play a lot of and was a lot of fun and is by the original devs of Left 4 Dead and has that kind of vibe. I didn't play much beyond some of the multiplayer because it still just does feel very much generically, here's a bunch of zombies and some interesting scenarios, interesting characters, now just go kill zombies, which just doesn't seem to interest me as much as it used to.
Right, and especially if it's trying to be a larger game. I feel like there is always a place for something like I made a game with zombies in it.
Right.
Where you're like, I made this to be small, mindless fun. You are going to definitely get your money's worth because I'm not asking much.
Right.
That absolutely can be a thing. But you're right, for it to be a larger project, to be a larger ask, more needs to be done with it. And there's been plenty done with zombies. I mean, did you ever play Plants vs. Zombies?
Of course, sure, yes.
I really didn't. But having them sort of be weird lumbering goblins, essentially, for your tower defense is an interesting application of them and a showcase of just good design and ingenuity.
Yeah, Plants vs. Zombies is one of those games that I played on a phone like everybody else until I played it on whatever console I got it on after that, I think 360. And yeah, that is a more lighthearted romp. You know, there are disco zombies and football zombies who have more armor and all this other stuff. And they even made 2 first-person shooter games, Garden Warfare 1 and 2, which you take control of a plant or zombie in a more first-person setting, but it's still just as goofy. And I think it's things like that are trying to think outside the box and trying to do different stuff. And that doesn't mean that there isn't a place for serious zombie games and the Call of Duty zombie modes and, you know, your new Resident Evils, which I'm sure we'll get one. Look, we got Sexy Vampire Lady last year, so anything's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the more that I see the Days Gone of the world come out, and again, I'm basing it just on what I saw. I haven't played it yet. I think that kind of stuff becomes less interesting, just in the same way that I was never really interested in military shooters. But then when I've played the occasional one that has a good story, like I think it was Spec Ops The Line maybe that had a good story. And then
that's the one that everyone talks about, yes.
Right. Or even, you know, thinking I don't like shooters and then playing Doom 2016 and going, oh, this is fun. This is interesting. I think we're not beyond being able to do that. I just think that you're right. I think we have to think a little outside the box. And I think even more so, I think it's in the indie space that we're going to see more diversity. It does feel like, at least in the last 10 years, that indie games are doing more to push the boundaries of genre and genreification because they don't have big companies looming over them and they can kind of, you know, push things a little more because they have the freedom with less oversight. And like, again, I don't want to ignore some games that have done really interesting things with zombies, like the Reaper zombies, the Husks, and the later Reaper-fied other races in Mass Effect 3. Like, that is an interesting way of like technology creating zombies because they're still sort of organic, but they are being controlled by these massive machines and indoctrinated. And it's a different kind of zombification than other games have done. So like the creativity is out there. I just don't think we see it as much as we could.
Oh, yeah. And I think some of it, too, is the fact of some of it is working with what the definition of a zombie is, because it is fairly nebulous. And whether it is techno-organic or it's something like the Flood from Halo.
Sure.
You know, parasites taking over everything, whether it is the possessed sort of humans from the Doom games. Are they zombies? Sort of. It's hell has taken them over. Isn't that essentially what zombies are? When there's no more room in hell, the dead shall walk the earth.
Right.
Depending on how you want to define it as well. And I think because we have an embarrassment of riches of a lot of different portrayals of what a zombie is or how it can be or what it is. Just going, it's a zombie, feels stale. It feels like it lacks any sort of decision on the design. And if a zombie like that, it's a zombie, is just an aspect of a larger game, sure, fine. If it is something where you didn't expect there to be undead or something like that to happen in this game, and now we're doing that, okay, cool. Yeah, like, throw a curveball at me. But building around it does require a little more care. And there is still definitely a place for games to be built around the concept of the zombie.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think right now coming to mind is a bunch of places where I feel like they have been more creative. You know, I played Alan Wake for the first time, I believe last year. They just released a remaster and announced a sequel that's going to be more survival horror focused. And like that one, it's like the darkness was controlling these people. And so it was this weird, like, and light would, like, you would have to use a flashlight on them and then shoot them or whatever else. And I think the more stories we continue to get like that, or even in Control, the hiss taking over people and transforming people. Also, like, I think creating different ways of supernatural zombification or space zombification that goes outside of it rose from the grave, it's some virus, I will always lean towards more. Now, if we could just get a proper zombie Pokemon that's literally undead, I think we'll really have made it.
I think the closest we could get is probably Parasect in its way.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Because technically Parasect is the mushrooms on its back controlling the little aggressive nightmare creatures. Arceus has ruined Parasect for me because the Parasects in that game are so more aggressive than they ever have any business being. But that's a story for another time. I'm curious, Geoff, do you have any favorite zombie games or like specific zombie character that you really liked?
I would say probably my favorite zombie games are classic Resident Evil.
Sure.
Resident Evil 3 definitely left an impression on me, and I really love Nemesis because I hate him so much.
Yeah.
And I never felt more like I was in a horror movie. And there have been other times in recent games where I feel more immersed in a horror movie experience, but I don't know. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis really did that for me. And I'd have to think about it. I think some of my more favorite like zombie characters are the sorts that are like, wait, what? Like, technically, Vincent Valentine from Final Fantasy VII is kind of a zombie.
You're not
He's
wrong.
an intelligent, rational one, but he is a dead, unaging form that has been brought back through Genova? Sure.
Question mark?
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Question mark?
Yeah, Vincent Valentine would easily be my favorite zombie, I think. I mean, I'm fairly predictably. He has long hair. He's goth. Like, anyone who knows me knows that I love Vincent Valentine.
He's your boy.
He's my boy. But yeah, I think it's funny. It's hard to say that the Left 4 Dead game or the Last of Us, I keep screwing those two up. They both start with L. The Last of Us
Fair
games,
enough.
It's tough for me to say the Last of Us games are my favorite zombie games because I think they're incredible games that I will never play again because they were so brutal.
Right.
But I think worth experiencing. But I mean, I think some of my favorite games that have zombies in them are ones that do something interesting with the form, whether it's a Castlevania game or, you know, like I mentioned, Alan Wake. I mean, I think I might say if we consider the hiss from Control zombies, they would probably be my favorite just because it's not space. It's not virus. It's science fiction. It's otherworld artifacts. It's alternate universes. It's anomalies and science fiction in a way that's not space. And I think that's really cool and really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, we have to throw it out for zombie Ridley / ex-parasite Ridley / cyber Ridley, you know, and all those times that fucker's come back. No sign of him in Dread, though, which was nice.
Yeah. He had his time. It's fine.
Yeah.
We've done enough.
But I think those would be some of my favorite. I think that what's fascinating about topics like this and topics like this that we'll probably have in the future about other focused kinds of games and enemy types is that video games find a way to do things with the genre and those specific things in the genre that a lot of other mediums can't. I feel like books can get as granular, you know, movies and TV have limited budget, limited scope in a way that I think games also can have. But, you know, we've had zombie movies for ages and, you know, George Romero and beyond have done some really interesting things with zombies. But I think as time passes, we're hitting the limit of this is a horde of infected, make a movie. I think we really need to find broader ways to involve that narrative in a way that's more engaging, because I foresee people getting bored of zombies in the next decade if we don't, like, if you think about it, Resident Evil still being about the undead, the newest Resident Evil Village was more successful, I think, because while there are zombies in it, it's about other kinds of undead, the larger narrative of the Resident Evil story, vampire mommy, all those other things.
Right.
I think
all these things.
I think when Resident Evil started to pivot in the last couple of games with either more dynamic, specific undead characters like the family that's in Resident Evil 7 that you're trying to escape from, who might maybe undead, are cannibals. I haven't really played the game, but just gleaning what I've seen, too scary for me. Like, I think those are the kinds of things that are really going to push zombie as a, I guess, genre forward in a way that games that just you're fighting hordes of zombies, have fun, aren't going to. And that said, there's nothing wrong with those games. If people like those games, they can be fun. If you liked Days Gone, I don't fault you for that. I just think, for me personally, I need more out of that kind of narrative now than just kill zombies.
Yeah. As far as my own predilections and preferences for horror and gothic, what have you, zombies were never high on my list. But for some people they are. And so if there's zombies in it, cool, great. It is still a selling point. But I think you're right that I think a lot of folks want a little more exploration of what it means, what it is, why is this here? And video games are a great arena in which to do that. You can have a zombie movie that's an hour and a half, 2 hours, and you can probably do plenty. But putting yourself in an open world game, in an action game, in a first person shooter, in whatever, you have more time to just be dealing with more zombies. A movie of watching someone spend half an hour just mowing down zombies would get very stale after a while, whereas doing that yourself while playing a game, that's exactly what you want to be doing. And it gives time for ruminations and meditations on these things to bloom if that's what you want in your narrative. And I think games are great for exploring that, but it does have to be deliberate.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm curious what our listeners think. Do you have favorite zombie games? Do you hate zombies? Do you hate the idea of the undead? Do you only play games with undead? Like, I'm curious where the bar is for folks. I mean, I'm always curious how folks engage with horror, especially since for me, I didn't engage with most horror games for a long time. But that said, there are zombies in plenty of the other media that I love. I mentioned Mass Effect before, and I didn't quite think about it in that way because of the different presentations. So I'm curious, like, who in our audience, likes them or doesn't, and like why you do and don't like zombies.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about stuff like World of Warcraft, where you can play as the undead. They're everywhere. It's an entire society. And I haven't played WoW in a long time, but I definitely played a lot of undead casters during the brief time that I did. But we want to hear from all of you about your feelings, experiences, thoughts on this topic. And you can reach out to us on Twitter, through Gmail, most social media, Fun and Games Pod, across all of that. You can also go to certainpov.com to check out not only all sorts of other great shows on our network about all kinds of great pop culture, but other episodes of this one as well, and find a permanent invite link to our Discord server where we talk about games, books, movies, and we do have a game channel where we talk about things like this, and we would love to talk about all of that with you.
Yeah, you can also find Geoff and I on Twitter. Geoff is at Geoff Makes Noise, and I am, of course, am at DJ_Stormageddon. Please comment, like, subscribe, share, write us a review if you can. You can now rate on Spotify. Give us 5 stars. I like to think we're a 5-star podcast. You can rate and review us, of course, on Apple Podcasts as well. All of that helps us to get featured and more folks like you incredible people to discover us. I've been driving engagement and trying to get more people involved. I think Geoff's questions of the day have been great. For those who don't know, he is the man behind the curtain for a lot of those, though I have mine from time to time. But if there's other things you want us to do to drive engagement, or community events, or things you want to engage with us, Geoff and I have both been streaming again more regularly. Like, let us know. We want to continue to grow this community. It's been great to interact with all of you, and we're always looking on ways to improve. You know, if you have questions, comments, please send them to us. Like, we're making this show for y'all, and we love to hear from you and want to continue to grow with all of y'all.
Yeah, whether you have comments, questions, concerns about this episode, previous episodes, areas of the gaming world you want us to look at, people we should interview or talk to, games we should discuss, franchises to reminisce about, or what have you. We do this for our own enjoyment, but we do this so that we can reach out to all of you and hope to hear from you, because this is a conversation. And thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
Man, that movie was excellent.
It really was. Totally blew my expectations away.
I know, right? Now I really want to tell everyone about it. But I'm not sure how.
Yeah. If only there was a podcast dedicated to reviewing films and discussing the latest news and trailers on upcoming films. That would be nice.
Yes, for sure. And we can call it The Cineguy Show.
What? No. It will be called Real Movie Critic Unleashed.
No. How about Cineguy featuring Real Movie Critic?
How about the Real Movie Critic and his sidekick, the Cineguy?
CG and RMC.
RMC and CG!
The Real Movie Critic versus the Cineguy. Only at CertainPOV.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're going down, critic.
Bring it on, guy.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.